In this episode of Magicians Talking Magic, we're chatting with acclaimed magician, coach, consultant, and shaman Jared Kopf. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's loaded with tons of magic wisdom, stories, and a peek at Jared's upcoming appearance at the FISM North American Championship of Magic. The FISM North American Championship of Magic and the combined Canadian Championship 2021 are taking place in Quebec City from September 30th to October 3rd. It features an incredible lineup of magicians, including Juliana Chen, Sean Farquhar, Carissa Hendricks, Billy Kidd, Jared Kopf, Spidey, Luc Langevin, Ted and Marion Outerbridge, and more. Be sure to visit FISMNA2021.com for details, full schedule, and to register. Quebec City is also host to the historic FISM World Championship of Magic, happening July 25th to 30th, 2022. Visit FISMQuebec2022.com. Don't forget to subscribe to Magicians Talking Magic and join us in Discord. Let's jump in here, chatting about magic in Jared's home state of Texas.
Well, Bob White in particular, but there are a host of wonderful magicians from Texas. John Cornelius, Chuck Smith. I guess he lives out in New Mexico, where he did for a while. I think he lives in Texas now. Presley Guitar. Steve Freeman was down here. He's from Oklahoma. But there's just around this area, there are just so many wonderful magicians. I was pretty lucky, growing up here. There was a hub, kind of a secret hub. It was like the East Coast and the West Coast was the big deal in the States, wherever Vernon was, kind of. But right. There was like a secret conglomerate of badasses in Texas the whole time. Yeah,
absolutely.
Cool. Charlie Miller, right? Charlie Miller, he's from El Paso and all that. Really cool.
Would you say, like, when did you get the spark? When did this all start for you?
I don't ever remember not being interested in magic. I always loved magic. And I encountered it 2 or 3 times before I knew it was before I knew about fields of study as a kid. I remember, it's hard to remember what is the first encounter with magic. But I do remember my grandfather doing, now that I look back at it, it was the circus card trick, but he didn't explain it to me. It was just one of the other cool things that he could do. Right, so he could draw a perfect circle with a compass, right, on a piece of graphite paper. Just blew my mind. You just draw a perfect circle, and then he could do, he did that card trick, and he wouldn't, he didn't explain it. He also had a really massive collection of playing cards, really beautiful cards, tally-ho card. This was in New York, so he had all the tally-hos and illustrated decks. He wasn't a magician. He knew that one trick, I think. Maybe he knew a couple of others. I didn't see those then. But yeah, he was like the coolest grandpa. I had that. And then
did he ever explain the trick? How did he? No,
he didn't. Mm-mm. He never explained it to me.
Fascinating, really, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And by the time I was into it, he was very ill, and we never really discussed it. And he wasn't the warmest person either. That was his way of being warm at all, was trying to find something to talk to the child about, while my grandmother was in the in the kitchen or running the house. Yeah, he never explained
magic in
it.
New York, though. My goodness, lots to see.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I wound up at Tannins, and I was in it so early that I didn't know how lucky I was. Even the New York Public Library, Lord of mercy, I took out the coolest books. That's where I found Royal Road, Greater Magic. I found a bunch of choice books, even at the Dallas Public Library too. So I started out with just books. We did in the late 80s, early 90s. I didn't have a VCR or the ability to buy. I know, like, if you lost a videotape at the video rental, it cost you $100
right
to replace the tape. You know what I mean? Now you buy a VHS tape for 99 cents.
Yeah,
very weird. So I didn't really have any instructional videos or anything. I just lived inside the books for a long time. Like one book that really fascinated me was the Houdini scrapbook. It was just all, there were no secrets in it really, but it was just all of his publicity photos and things like that. So that really blew me away. Yeah, there's never really been a time where I haven't been in and around it. So I can't really pinpoint. There are a number of little spots. Like I saw the linking rings as a kid, maybe it was, I don't know, 6 years old, maybe younger than that, 5 years old. And I found out that the secret to that in a book. And I said, well, that's not what I saw. That cannot possibly be how that works. And that really has come full circle. I'll tell you a quick story. I was at Mystique Dining in Utah, Salt Lake City. And this woman was celebrating her 21st birthday. I'm certain she'd been drunk before, but she was drunk that night. She was partying. And, you know, in the course of my routine of the rings, I kind of have that Vernon style, that Erdnasian style where you have a plausible sophistry that apparently explains the procedure, but in reality explains the contrary of what takes place. Indeed, if you think about it, in Vernon's working repertoire, it's difficult to name a trick where he doesn't tell them how it works and then immediately disabuse their mind as to that must be the, you know, that it can't be that. And I take that a little too far for some people, I imagine, when I do the rings. And this young lady came out of the show and she said, it's my birthday. May I see those rings? And I said, well, I told you how it worked in there, right? And she said, no, I want to see him. And I thought to myself, well, she could either look it up on the internet later or look in the bag now. So I said, all right, here, take the bag. But before you open that bag, let me tell you right now, once you look, you cannot unlook. I'm warning you, you probably don't want to look in there. And so she says, no, I want to look. She takes the bag and her boyfriend starts to follow her to she's going to go off to the other side of the room to be private. And her boyfriend starts following her. She says, no, it's my birthday. You stay here. So I'm chatting with the boyfriend, keeping my eye out to see what she does with my prop, you know. And she unzips the bag. She takes one look inside. She gets this very quizzical look on her face, and she zips it up. And she comes back and she says, just one? I said, I told you, that's what I said inside there. And she says, but that's impossible. I told you didn't want to look. Happy birthday. And she walked out even more enthralled than she was in the show. So
That's incredible story.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
Do you think you would have done that 20 years ago or?
No, I would have tap danced around it. I'd say, no, you can't see him, or I don't know what I would have said. But now it's like David Devant put it. I don't get me wrong. I'm not an expose guy. I don't like exposing tricks. I think that's a frivolous and boring thing to do. But Devant put it well in Secrets of My Magic. He says, the sooner magicians realize that locked books and secret codes are not the real secrets of magic. The real secret is refining your own master key to unlock something inside you that cannot be duplicated. It can't be copied, right? Few people care to climb that mountain because it's difficult. That's the real secret. So I don't explain how tricks work for the most part, even though, you know, that Vernon style, it really is that. It's more, I want to put a different kind of effect on our conjuring effects. Like every conjuring effect should have another effect on top of it, a meta effect, an uppercase E effect, as I like to put it. Like, what is the spell that it is casting? Because it's going to do one or the other. And I think most magicians but I want them to think I can read their mind. And I'm just not interested in that, because that's coming along for free just by doing the trick. For the love of Pete, they thought of a card, you told them what it was, right? Like that's for free. What's the spell though? What's it for? What are you going to do with it? That's what interests me. And so I don't know, opportunities like with that's never going to happen again in all likelihood, that what happened with that woman. But it was the right move at the time. I just shot from the hip. I do that a lot too. I don't recommend it, but
this
just the way I roll.
Element of magic has diminished. And so I guess
It just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
I
You know,
guess
you do the rings is the perfect example of it, right? And in greater magic, Hilliard puts it this way, right? In the hands of a bungler, it's a trick whose secret is easily discovered. But in the hands of an artist, it becomes a mystery where even if the people are familiar with the trick, they'll just say, oh, those are makeshift rings that I saw that were made to sell, and that this magician has some other secret. Because it's once you do that trick and you do it well, you could do it for a room full of scientists. I've done that many times. I do all this mind reading stuff, and they say, oh, I could see how you must read people's body language or something, because that's really in the zeitgeist now, all that pseudo body language crap. And they say, yeah, but how did you do the rings? This guy's won a Nobel Prize, you know, asking me how like, I just don't understand the rings. I'm like, yes, this is amazing, right? And the pattern's all about how it works. So clearly it isn't, they don't believe it. If you do it well enough, that's not the thing they're hanging their hat on. How did the trick work, right? It's got to be a foregone conclusion that they can't figure out how the trick worked, for crying out loud.
Right.
I think at the end of the day, it's got to be for something, right? I want the rings to make people think about their grandfather and his grandfather and his grandfather, that's what the rings mean to me. And that's why I do them, right? So that people think about a lineage and an unbroken chain, right?
Well, when you look at a routine or in search of a new routine that has that impact, what are you looking for? How do you pinpoint that?
Gosh, I'll tell you, that is the toughest thing, Ryan, because the more mature one becomes in the art, the fewer tricks appeal. You know, there aren't, I forget who said that, when people are looking for a new trick, I go look for an old one. You know, that's a
great
relatively witty idea, but I know it when a trick hits me, it's like lightning. You know it's a 10, and you know sometimes immediately what you're going to do with it. But they're few and far between now. Like the thing I'm hot on right now is the Aikido doll, that like the pencil that rises on your hand, but
yep.
the voodoo doll. I'm obsessed with it. And I think what I'm going to use that for is like I don't get really a lot of hecklers, but I get a lot of helpers. You know, like there's a heckler and a helper. They're both hecklers. The heckler is just a jerk, and the helper thinks they're helping the show, but they just didn't read the script and realize they don't have any lines. What are they doing? Right. And so they're not helping, but they think they are, so they mean well. And so that's a perfect opportunity, for me to have an effect. I want to have an effect that will tell this person, maybe don't, if no one else is clapping at the end of the jazz solo, maybe you shouldn't either, right? If everyone else is clapping in the middle of the jazz solo, maybe you should too, right? There's a protocol that some people never learned. And I want to have effects that kind of teach a lesson or a moral or have a different effect, right? So I think I'm going to use the doll for something like that. And that's not, I have no work on the doll, really. It's the same method Aikido had, but the presentation is what gets me dreaming. I won't tip that now on here, because I'm telling you, it's good. It's really good. And it's not a super long presentation. It's just it's in my pocket for that moment. And if the moment doesn't happen, it doesn't come out of my pocket. Right.
So do you find yourself more in a spontaneous magic situation or in shows? What would you say is
shows? Very rarely do I do spontaneous performances.
Yeah.
If people coax me, I'll try to Leipzig my way. A while back, I love showing people magic, but as one matures in the art, you realize that some things are better left imagined than done sometimes. So I don't really find myself doing magic out and about as much as I once did, but that's also a choice, right? And I think it's a strong one. You don't want to be the person who's constantly doing magic. How many opera singers do you know break out into arias? They just don't. People just say, oh, what do you do? You say, I sing opera. They go, oh, that's amazing. How long have you done that? They don't say, oh my gosh, would you sing me,
Right.
sing me an aria? But then that doesn't happen.
I
But
struggle with this one
magicians,
greatly, for sure.
but because it's so fun.
Right.
It's so fun. One of the things that I do on occasion is when I have friends, like if I meet up for coffee, sometimes I'll have something planned just to round out the conversation, and I'll do my best to get them to bring up the topic that the trick is for, or I'll talk around it, hoping that gets captured in our conversation. I say, it's actually kind of easier to illustrate this than it is to try to explain it. And then you can do the little Michael Weber level piece of mystery. One thing.
Totally.
I like doing that, but doing magic at a cocktail party, they really got to be begging.
Right.
And then if you do that, for heaven's sake, I mean, you take the glass tumblers and you wrap them in newspaper, right? You got to be grippo. You got to always be prepared to do magic, right? So I'll have the rolled up dollar bills, or one rolled up dollar bill, so that I can roll up other dollar bills right in front of them and do the cups and balls with all these borrowed props. And that just takes the trick to a whole other level. I mean, if anyone's doing the cups and balls and they've never done the Stars of Magic one, or the Mellini style, where you just make the props in front of them and just chit chat and everything, you got 12 minutes there for the love of Pete. That's all you need to do. And then the oranges and the lemon and everything come out at the end. I mean, Lord have mercy. That's just a miracle, particularly because they begged you. They're like, oh, come on, do something. And you're like, well,
Right.
you got any, let's see, you got a newspaper over there? That'll work. Give me some of those tumblers there, right? And then you really have something. But for the most part, that's where I do shows, but I try to make my shows feel as much like those kind of impromptu situations or regular conversations as possible, right? If my magic show is feeling like kind of, too rehearsed, or if you can see all the times that I'm looking in my practice mirror, I don't like that. I want to be invisible. I want all my practice to disappear to them,
Totally.
I don't want them to see the practice at all.
And let's speak about practice. What is your process for practicing a new material?
I'm a very poor practicer lately, more of a dreamer as of late, but I piddle practice with cards, by sitting in front of the mirror and put on some music and tap my foot and work on sleights and stuff. But it's been a while since I've gone through an entire show and really blocked it and everything. But I'm also at the stage, and I don't recommend this, but I'm at the stage where it's like we were talking about before we started recording this session. I started admiring how these great comedians write their acts. And, maybe back pre-1970, it was very common for comedians to have writers. Even Richard Pryor had writers, and but he had a very natural, as C. Lang Neil would put it, natural conversational style. That he was doing bits is not apparent. Dave Chappelle, can see him on a Tuesday and then see him on a Thursday, and it's the same act, but both times it's going to sound like he's just talking off the top of his head. It is that masterful. And the reason is because those bits were born by an evolutionary process in front of audiences. He started out with concepts, and he's naturally funny. He has the gift of gab. So he can go to a comedy club and play it for 4 hours with no bits, and then maybe leave that 4-hour set with the kernel of an idea for 1 or 2 bits that he might develop and try again and let the audience whittle away at it. And then he goes and works and starts, because he's a master comedian. There's one wonderful moment, one of his specials, where he talks about he has a bowl full of punchlines. So he has all these punchlines he's come up with, and then he does the joke in reverse. Like he reaches in the bowl, takes out the punchline, tells the audience the punchline, and then he figures out how to get the punchline again. It becomes a callback to itself. It's really avant-garde.
Brilliant.
And he can do that because he woodshedded how to write a comedy act, and now that's part of his person. And so for the most part, when I'm developing a show or adding a new piece, it's typically buttressed by stuff that's already worked out and has already gone through that process, where I am saying the same thing, even if when I find myself, like I was sending this script to Paul Vigil or my buddy Handsome Jack, these lines and things for projects they were working on. I'm sitting there realizing this is the first time this script has ever been transcribed, ever. So it's kind of cool that it's being preserved, and their projects are what spur it. But I tend not to record my performances. I never do that.
So?
Yeah, and I never. I basically don't write anything down anymore. Though I did. Don't get me wrong. Like,
right.
I learned line for line Bob White's act. That's how he taught me. And I would go up there and I could turn Bob White. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Now, before I commence, I want to tell, I have 10 cards in my pocket. I know there are 10 because I counted them before I came out here, but I'll count them for you now. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 1 makes 10. Now, everybody in this room knows a 5-year-old child can take a coin, snap it, make it go up the sleeve. But few people know you can make a regular size, poker size playing card, pass up the sleeve, under the jacket, and down into an empty right-hand trousers pocket where I have only a gentleman's penknife and a very old coin. I can just do that over and over and over again. But he had that natural conversational style. It didn't sound like patter. He even had his own personal interruptions where he would change his mind or he'd change his all of that's written, right? So he was a very much write it down and write the script kind of performer, though it did not betray itself when he performed. And I learned to do it that way. And then eventually, through no design, just through habit or laziness or a combination of both, I stopped doing it that way. But I still write scripts. They just go through that evolutionary process in shows,
For sure. And at this point, it's more about transition lines and single routines versus an entire show. So the workload is just more focused rather than vast as it is for so many of us at the beginning. It really is a game of not only like discovering yourself on stage, it's also like finding out what material works and doing so much new. It certainly is a feedback loop is required for many magicians. We talk about a lot on the podcast about feedback and things, but it is critical to have that feedback, that loop, and people that you can trust to get it as well, which is important as well. So what would you advise magicians that are getting feedback or want to get some honesty about something that they're working on? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I would tell them to distrust applause. Applause cues and things like this are very good theatrical contrivances. They're good for learning stagecraft. But applause typically happens at the end. And then people say, I approve of the denouement, and they clap. It is not, there's an applause where the audience is taken to a realm where language doesn't exist anymore. They're kind of, they disappear for a moment. I think all great moments of astonishment do that. That's kind of what I think astonishment is. It's like, I try not to be crude about it, but it's like the little death, or it's like like when you get in an argument with someone and then you have esprit d'escalier, right? And you think, oh, I should have said that. When you're thinking, oh, I should have said that, you're gone. The id is gone. You are a conduit of the muses, right? Especially when you realize you didn't write that comeback. That's the comeback that occurred to you later. Right? There's a lot of this occurred to you. And I think a lot of applause is not that. I think it is just coming at the end of the trick because it is polite, as the unit that is the audience knows that is what you're supposed to do when something is over, or when someone does this, or when someone does this and smiles. And I distrust all of that. So I would say distrust it, use it by all means to get your show to flow like a performance. But I would always distrust that. That is not the feedback that you want. Indeed, you should try for different feedback. You should say, tonight, I will perform and I will attempt to squelch all applause. I will step all over the climax to an effect. I'm just going to bulldoze right over the top of it. I'm not going to give them even time to show me their appreciation, right? Which is, the kind of show that I prefer these days. Who wouldn't want people banging on the walls and freaking out? That is good, but it's not that it's too easy. It's just too difficult to distinguish that and the one that's merely polite. Sometimes you can just tell because they're not really giving it, it's like a golf clap. So I would distrust applause. And then for the most part, I think the biggest struggle for performers is knowing what they're trying to say, if anything. You don't have to say anything, but you do have to know that you don't want to say anything so that you're not going to, right? But if you do want to say something with an effect or with a show as a whole unit and all that, you have to have that at the forefront of your mind. And that will guide you more than any instructional book or DVD or download can do. That's the other thing, is I think most magicians know what tricks they like already, and yet they're still after the new trick. And there's nothing wrong with that, because who wouldn't want to be looking out for the latest miracle? But most tricks are not 10s. Most of them are 3s, 4s, a few 5s. And you know what your 10s are, and you probably know why you like that trick. And so that's a good spot to be in. You can do no wrong telling when you're performing an impromptu situation, or even on the stage, telling people why you love something or why you dislike it, and that may not be the last presentation you give to a trick, but it will be an honest one. It'll have sincerity, and you won't be drawing from the part of your brain that is lying. For the most part, I try not to lie in my life, and in, sometimes it can't be avoided, and on the stage, and that the same thing is, the truth will set you free. It really will. So the truth of the matter, like I start the rings, for instance, after I do a trick, I said, man, boy, do I love that illusion. Isn't it beautiful? Gosh, that's one that you wish you wrote, but I didn't. Vernon wrote that. He was a genius. You want to see a trick that I hate? Right now they laugh and you say, well, of all the tricks I hate, it is the one I love the most. And now I take the rings out and I show them the trick that I dislike. Beautiful, yeah. But that I can't help myself. I find myself doing it all over the world. And that's what that trick becomes. That's one of the things that it's about. It's really why I show it to them. I just started telling people why I want to show them the thing, instead of I have a set of rings made of a permeable metal known only to myself and Erasmus of Rotterdam. Like, I'm not interested in that anymore, unless that is serving some other purpose, which might be, here is some, like what Ricky Jay did, right? With the exclusive coterie, where he wanted to show people what it was like to see a magician from Victorian or Edwardian times, and what it would have felt like, right? That's why he's shown it to him. The card trick's coming along for free. But if you don't think he's doing that trick so he can say, ladies and gentlemen, I shall endeavor to illustrate how futile are the attempts of plebeians to enter that select circle of society known as the beau monde, and to prove how such entree is prevented, I shall beseech the fault, right, blah, 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 right? That's why he's doing it, so he can do that, not to make the queens jump around. That part is kind of incidental, but does that part have to be perfect and impossible to figure out? Yeah, but I think that's got to be a foregone conclusion, right?
It brings up so many points that I wanted to just ask you about. The one that comes to my mind right off the bat that I just can't help but, do you feel like there's less opportunity for performers these days than there was back in our time? You think it's about the same?
Everybody's nostalgic for a time that they didn't live through. I'm sure it would have been great to have vaudeville and the Chitlin circuit, the Chautauqua circuit. I played a couple Chautauqua shows like on the tail end of its existence. It's still going around, but there's definitely no moneymaker. You're going to be playing a lot of public libraries, but no, magic is unique in the sense that yes, the opera singer is probably not going to break out into an aria in a smoky or ambient cafe or club or bar. But in magic, especially at the witching hour, that's exactly when that stuff is supposed to come out. So no, I don't think there's just different performing opportunities. The Oulipo, the French poetry art, that art movement, it's really poetry movement, but they embraced restrictions, right? They loved having restrictions. And the funny thing is, everything is Oulipo, right? Shakespeare, when he decides to write a sonnet, he has imposed a restriction, a rhyme scheme, the iambs, and this is all in iambic pentameter, and it's going to have an A, B, B, or whatever the structure is, right? And so that structure is the restriction. And that's the way everything is anyway. But the Oulipo just really noticed it and embraced it. And so when people say, oh man, how would you do a Zoom show? Everything's going to change. That never didn't bother me at all. I have to be honest. I'm not knocking anybody's suffering and difficulty during this time, because it sucks. It was rough and it still is. But it's just a restriction. It's just a medium that you have to use, right? Given the circumstances. So when Picasso had no paint, he did his business and painted that on newspaper, if you catch my drift, right? Every last one of them was priceless. So I don't think that really matters, honestly.
Yes, and we agree on the podcast. We've said as well, like there's just Zoom and virtual style shows are now here to stay, and that's just another platform. Yeah. Evolution is occurring, and in our art form as well, and that's what makes it exciting. There's certainly all new possibilities out there as well. And I must say, speaking of lots of possibilities, that on your website you've got an eclectic mix of job titles. Including magician, consultant, coach, priest, shaman, and shape shifter. I have to ask, you're welcome to talk about any and all of those. I just, looks like a photographer, like I'm a total photography nerd, I want to ask you about the shapeshifter and the Vernon recreations.
Yeah, so I never aimed to be an actor, let alone an actor playing the part of a magician. As fond as I am of that Robert Houdin quote, it's like one of those quotes that everybody thinks is cool, but I think they just like that it's a tautology. I don't think they, hold on, I got a guy driving by with a very loud muffler. I think that might be Morse code for something. Anyway, where was I going? Oh yeah. So I didn't strive to be really anything. I'm kind of lazy, I just kind of float, and I never strived to be an actor, but I just wound up kind of being one, and on a very small scale. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm not going out for auditions or anything. I just don't distinguish that stuff. Like I love music and playing music and doing magic and acting and all that, and telling jokes and writing and making books, and they're not different to me. They're all magic. I agree with Alan Moore and my dear friend John Wilson. He has, I don't roll with no chumps, right? And he has a really wonderful way of putting an Alan Moore observation that magic is, these are John's words, but they're a paraphrase of Alan Moore, the comic artist and novelist. But he says that magic is the acceptance, delivery, and manipulation of symbols. And that's what it is. So people are doing magic all the time. Advertisers are doing magic. Everybody, if they decide what shirt they're going to wear that day, they're doing magic. But a magician, I told my pal Enrique Enriquez this, that I said, I don't know what magic is anymore, because it's just art or something, it's too difficult to categorize, but I know what a magician is now. And he says, oh, I'm all ears. And I said, a magician is someone who does magic on purpose. And then Enrique said, oh, there's too much intentionality in that. And I said, oh, you're right. How about this? So I amended it to, a magician is someone who notices he or she is doing magic. Because it's happening a lot, all the time, all day, every day. How firm your handshake is, that's magic, right? Whether or not when you get pulled over, you hand the cop your ID with one hand and your insurance with the other, just to befuddle that cop just a little bit. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. That's all magic. That's the same as a top change or any other move. The same psychology is at work, in my estimation.
Yeah.
So with the acting,
yep.
I just don't distinguish that. So like Vernon, it happened by accident. I've always been a pretty good mimic. I love voices and I love characters, but I never wanted to be an impressionist. I just liked impressionists or impressions. And I liked Vernon, and I was obsessed with him, And so the Vernon impression just became, first it was a joke at magic conventions, getting Vernon to say absurd and awful things. And then it became a kind of an act, but by accident. People ask me, they're like, will you do that at this? Or maybe we can make you up to look like him. And so Robin Fuqua, boy, is she wonderful. She did the makeup the first time I did Vernon. Johnny Thompson did my makeup for Vernon. In fact, Johnny Thompson is the last guy that gave me a haircut.
Wow.
Because he cut it when he made me up as Vernon a few years ago. And now I don't want to get my hair cut because the great Tom Sony cut my hair.
Right. Oh.
So yeah, that was just an accident. But I don't distinguish it from the magic. It's the same. Like if I want to do, it can't be an impression. If I couldn't embody him, so to speak, or really get into that character, I would not have done it. And yet I found myself able to do that in a small way. So it ceases to be an impression or an impersonation, and it's like a channeling. That I like. That is interesting to me. So I want to, to me, that's as close to raising the dead as I'm going to get. I'm not going to pull a Lazarus in any other way than that. So that was my motivation. I said, maybe I can bring him back for the dead for some of his pals. And that's where it started. And then,
so is Vernon the only a magician impression, or are they all magician impressions?
No, I do. I would do them, but I think some people are not flattered by the impression. So I do lots of magicians and my neighbors and my friends and actors, particularly characters they've played in films.
Yep.
It's hard to nail the actor. Like I can't do a Daniel Day-Lewis impression, but I can do a number of the characters that he's played. You see what I mean? Like I can't do a Dustin Hoffman impression that well, but I can do a good Captain Hook, right? That sort of stuff.
I have to. My friend of mine on a cruise ship she is an incredible impersonator. So I've seen in action this process, because I have no ability to impersonate in any way, shape, or form. And some people just have that knack for sure and have that ability. I can do occasionally the sorcerer from Harry Potter, the one that passed away. I can't think of his name right now, but Christina Bianco is this girl's name, and her fame is with impersonating Christina Bianco, or sorry, Celine Dion is what she can sing and sound exactly like.
Oh, amazing.
And she was working on a character, just like magicians. It's the same process. It's all practice, right? And so we were on a ship together working, and she was working on a new character, and to see her step in front of the mirror and like literally kind of correct herself and do it, and then over the course of that sentence towards the end, she got it. But it's just interesting to that mindset of impersonations is totally different. Thanks. And magic
Yeah.
doesn't usually see those impersonations as well. So what a charm. I'm sure people.
Well, the voice is step one. That's like
Right.
learning the sleight. And
Yes.
then the body language, gestures, the way, the way the way you hold yourself, that's why, like De Niro, a lot of people can do the face. They can get the face because he's got such an expressive face, but without the faces, indeed, the voice is so affected by the shape of the mouth, the way
Totally.
that if you're hunched over, it's all gets affected by the body. So you start realizing, just like with magic, that it's very connected, and you can't have any missing ingredients. Otherwise, it's just an impersonation or an impression,
right,
rather than a channeling, or how I don't know how else to put it. But Vernon is the one in this world, in the magic world, that people know. But I could do any number of other magicians. They're just not as cool as Vernon. Vernon was such a character,
Absolutely.
He boy, was he the best. It's not even a contest, y'all.
Legend.
In fact, he's like one of those characters where I think like people really love him, and then I find out why, and I go, oh, you don't love him for the same reason I do. You know what I mean? Which is cool, but everyone agrees he was a legend, except for some Marlowites who were like, he wasn't that good. It's like, the hell he wasn't. Yes, he was. But yeah, Vernon was he was amazing.
I can't help but think his honesty was certainly, and was certainly one of the biggest feedbacks. On as a transition topic here, performing has sort of been on the sidestep for a bit. In a couple of weeks, well, at least here in Canada, live and things, we've got a convention coming up, and you and I will both be in Quebec City. So to sort of get back into the mind, have you been performing live lately?
I've been doing a lot of music. I play the guitar.
Yeah.
So I've been doing that just to get, stage
rust,
feeling
off.
Of being on the stage,
Yep.
So that has been good, but yeah, I haven't really done any. I did a performance for the residents at my wife's work. I do that all when COVID's not happening. I try to do that once a month, and they're a tough crowd because they're all old timers, so that's a good place to work. They're like, who's this young upstart trying to trick me? That I like. But no, I haven't really been doing a lot of shows. There's just not a lot have come my way in the last few months, which is when it could happen. I have a lot of things booked in October, November, December, but who knows if those are going to make it. I for a while there, I didn't even know if this Quebec City deal was going to work out. I'm still not sure. I hope it does, but you never know what could happen given the circumstances. But yeah, I don't really sweat it, honestly. I'm comfortable and confident in magic, and as I say, I try to make them as my performances as conversational as possible. And so I feel like I could have a cup of coffee with a couple pals in a heartbeat. I can do a magic show in a heartbeat, because it's not the grueling, butterflies in the stomach kind of thing that it was when I was younger. It's just not that anymore for me. And I feel lucky about that I can just go out and do a show. But one of the things that I like to do, especially when you're doing a show where on the bill are other magicians, I don't remember who said it, but someone said there's nothing more unmagical than a room full of magicians, right? It's because, when I typically do a show, if it's not solo and it's with a group of people, like a variety situation, because that's where it's at right now, is this neo variety arts, this pseudo vaudeville that's running around. So before COVID, I played a lot of those shows, and chances are I'd be the only so-called mystery performer on the bill. So that's a different thing. Whereas when I'm coming up there, I am comfortable finding out what everybody is doing and what they want to do and what will make them comfortable. Like at the castle, I go around, people say, what are you going to do at the castle? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know yet. So I go to the castle and find out. I ask Pop, I say, are you doing the rings? And he says, well, I was thinking about it. And I said, well, I was thinking about doing it. And he says, well, I won't do it then. I say, okay, I'll take the rings, but I won't do the rope. And so I like that part, right? So I don't really know what I'll do until, particularly with other magicians, because there's a lot of crossover, and I want to be the person that is not. I don't want to be a problem. I don't want anybody to be like, well, I really want to do that trick, right? You can't have two people doing the cups and balls. I mean, I suppose you could, and it wouldn't be impossible, but you know, if Sean Farquhar is going to do the cups and balls, I probably won't, right? So like, not to say that I just shoot from the hip or anything, like the routines are there. And so I kind of can go, as far as the routines go, a little bit on autopilot, right? And it doesn't take long, particularly with performances that are so short. An hour performance is a whole other ballgame. 15 minutes, that's really barely enough time to get started. If I squeeze 3 tricks into 15 minutes, that's pushing it for me, yeah. You know? And it's probably because I'm so verbose and, you know, I have the pretense to being eloquent and all that. So there's a lot of that pretentiousness and dripping, but yeah, that part's never really concerned me. But so like, I don't really need the stage, because I really have the attitude that, you know, I'm a magician when I wake up in the morning, when I make my coffee, I do my little alchemy, you know, I just have that attitude all day. When I go shopping for groceries, that is my attitude.
Right.
And I emulated that from a lot of, like, I noticed that Eugene Berger did not change character. Max Maven doesn't change character. Jeff McBride is just always Jeff. Vernon does not change character.
Right.
When he's on the Merv Griffin show, that's the same Vernon that people were having a drink with at the castle. They're the same person. He's a little less crude on live television. That's it. There's no difference. And so I'm content with that. Now I know that if more magicians realize that you are the magic. You are the magic. Right? How often have you shown up to a show? I don't know, because you're a stage guy, but how often have you shown up to a show with just your little kit, or your pockets are loaded up, and they go, where's the act? And you're like, don't worry about it. It's going to be just fine. Because they expect you to wheel in a bunch of boxes and pyro and everything. They don't know what's going to happen. And they don't realize that you're going to just make a glass tumbler disappear and produce an egg from a bag. They don't know that stuff just destroys, right? And it just so happens to fit on your person. I mean, that tickles me every single time. So, but like everybody else, I'm going to be rusty. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And there's no, how many shows would I'd have to do 30 shows to be a well-greased machine. And there's just not going to be 30 shows between now and then. So I take it as a restriction, like the Oulipo. I'm going to roll with it.
Yeah. Yeah. These are on the forefront of all of our minds. So appreciate your clarity on that. And
here's the other thing, y'all. What's the worst that could happen? You're already good. They're not going to boo you. Everybody relax, right? They can't wait to see live entertainment again. They can't wait. So relax. It's going to be fine. That's what I say. I really believe it too. Even if every trick in my show fails, it's going to be a good show. I just know it. I saw too many, like Steve Beam. One time I saw Steve Beam. I don't want to embarrass Steve, but one time he did a performance at one of Brian O'Neill's birthday bashes many years ago. This is over 20 years ago now. And gosh, he would do a shuffle and the car to get out of, something would go haywire. And just almost every trick, just something went wrong. One of the best performances of an entertainer I've ever seen. Masterful. Malone's tricks don't even need to work. They always do, or most of the time they do, but he doesn't need them, because Bill is the magic. He is magic. The tricks, they're just I don't know what they are. They're not the glue. They're like the glitter that you put on the glue.
Right.
You know, that's it. You don't need glitter. Glitter gets everywhere. It gets all over you. You know, show up and your wife's like, where were you? Why do you smell like shampoo and glitter? You know, why do you look like you're covered in glitter, right? It's overrated, I think. You know, so it's like Erdnase says, he's right. If you're not naturally blessed with the gift of gab, you got to rehearse your presentations as well as you rehearse the tricks and so on. And eventually, as you get more and more comfortable doing magic, you'll find yourself blessed with that gift that is not your doing. It's just an accident of the practice. The craft allowed you to make your art, right? But the craft is not the art. It's just it's just a bunch of tools. So I'm not even, it hadn't even really crossed. I sent an email to Renee Cloud and all the other people that are on the bill. They were like, what are you going to do? Let's plan this and da-da-da. And I just said, look, I mean, I'm going to be pacing around backstage like a lost puppy. And then I'll know when I waltz out there what I'm actually going to do. And I might not even know then.
Wow.
You know? And it just seems to work for me.
I love that.
We'll see. It could crash and burn.
And we will see.
This could be the time, Ryan, where it's just like, it's just, you're like, Jared.
It's not going to happen.
He talked up a big game and boy, did he ruin his career. So
well, everyone can come and watch on September 30th to October 3rd.
Yeah, man.
It's going to be amazing, honestly. And you also, so that's the North American the North American Championship of Magic happening in Quebec City,
right.
September 3rd to October 3rd, and FISMNA2021.com is the event we're specifically talking about, which I can't wait to see you here in Canada. And then you also have another event in October coming up as people can.
Yeah, so Paul Vigil and Mike Pashota and I have been putting on these online seminars, The Way of the Wizard. And they're kind of here's how I like to put it. You know how when you go to a convention, and this is not to knock conventions, like we're about to go to one, and it requires so much effort, time planning. I would never want to put one on. It's just so difficult. That is not my bag at all. Scheduling it, flying everybody in, yikes, putting on an event like that they must love it. They must love nightmares. They go to sleep hoping I hope I have a nightmare because that, it sounds like a nightmare to me, but I'm glad they do it because, you know, I love doing those things. However, we all know, even the people putting it on, if they have a chance to just take a break and go into the lobby, right, or the bar or whatever, and sit around, and you see it every convention, it happens. All the people are just sitting around chit-chatting, and you walk over and you're like, oh my God, that's Max Maven. Should I go eavesdrop on that? Maybe I can wiggle into that conversation. Maybe I can ask a question. That is what The Way of the Wizard is. It's just a round table that we would be having at the convention anyway, where people are like, are you going to go to that show? And you're like, well, we could go to the show, but I just don't want to move. I'm tired. I'm just going to sit in here and chat and have another cup of coffee or a beer, what have you. And then inevitably, there's just a big crowd of people that are looking around, and they're all not too timid. They're too polite to interrupt the conversation, but boy, they want to be around their hero. I was that too, you know. I just can't believe my lucky stars that I know all my heroes now. It's so weird, you know. Every time I see them, can they tell that I'm looking at them like, oh my God, you're Max Maven? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if they can tell. I think they could tell. But,
yes.
But yeah.
You, sir, are doing the same to others as well, though. So you are sending the elevator back down and inspiring.
Yeah, I guess so. It's very organic. You can't plan for it. It just happens, you know. So we were like, how do we make that round table? We missed it. That's all we did was miss it. We're like, man, we miss hanging. Why can't I hang around Luke Germain and Jason England? I said, well, because no one can go anywhere, right? So he said, well, can we have 100 people in one Zoom room? And they're like, sure. You know, Derek Chung, our good pal up in Canada, he said, yeah, he totally can. See, I don't know anything about the technology side of it. And so we just said, let's put that on. And so this will be the fourth one that we've done. And you can go to wayofthewizard.com and look it up. But it's super fun. It is very informal. You can't have no structure. So there is a structure, but we always have like little guest lectures. The lectures are very short. It's more like we're going to call this a lecture and we're going to put this in, but it's just a pre-planned, like imagine you're sitting at the table and then Jason England says, well, did you ever see this move? And now everybody's watching Jason do the move, including everybody on the periphery, right? And so instead of being like, hey, would you mind going away? We're talking secret stuff. It's just like, no, come on in, everybody listen and ask questions, because this is your opportunity, right? To ask Jason England how he puts English on the ball, right?
That's totally true. It sounds like that conversation, like you said, at actual conventions, you can have it in and around and about. So man, it sounds great. So if virtual or in actual convention sounds like something you're listening, you want to attend, there's a couple.
Yeah, one day we might do a live one, but that's not the zeitgeist we're in right now. Right now we're doing this one where you don't need to leave the comfort of your couch.
Yeah, I meant for the North American Championship or Way of the Wizard. Those listening has two options for sure.
Yeah. You go to both.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Get your feet wet in the live one, and then on the it's just it's kind of a different thing. It's more like a long workshop, right? But the feel of it was like that sitting around in the lobby. That's what we're going for. So kind of informal, and we've slightly formalized it.
That sounds great. So much magic to look forward to in the future. Thank you so much, Jared, for your time today for this chat. And I look forward to seeing you in person in Quebec City.
It's been real fun, Ryan. I love chatting with you.
I want to thank you so much for listening to this episode of Magicians Talking Magic. Be sure and check out FISMNA2021.com for information about all the artists, events, and to, of course, register. This was a double episode week. We featured Ted and Marion Outerbridge on Wednesday, and those are artists that are also appearing at the FISM-NA, so you want to check that out. And don't forget to join us on YouTube, because we've got a new bonus video series called Magic Questions, so you can see both videos for Jared and Ted and Marion Outerbridge. Go check that out on YouTube and be sure to like and subscribe. On behalf of Gromazing and myself, Shablazim and Tadoozle, we'll see you on the next episode. Meow.